We'll kick off the regional topics, one from the south, from the SSEMC, dealing with supply chain, inflation, and measures to mitigate risk.
I'm DaltonPratt. I'm from TxDOT. Controlling the controllable, I put this, when I say I mean the folks that back in Texas, put this presentation together. The thought was, what are we doing at TxDOT to mitigate and get through, the COVID, the pandemic, the supply chains, and all that issues. And I thought we had a pretty good plan, at least thought out. But since I've been here, I've heard of a bunch of good plans. And some of them are real similar and better than what we came up with. And trust me, I took notes, okay? Because I really don't care where a good idea comes from, okay? As long as it's a good idea, okay? And it's similar to having a parachute thrown on top of you when you're in a lagoon. It gets better when you get done panicking. We started off when it hit, I guess if you say, the first few days of COVID, okay? And there was an optimist. As me being kind of an optimist, I said, well, this isn't going to last longer than a couple of weeks, So we really we're not going to have much changing going on. Then there was the pessimist, not kidding. There was a group of folks within TxDOT said, let's stop all delivery of new equipment until the pandemic's over, because they were afraid they were going to catch COVID from the new vehicles coming in. I definitely didn't go that route. We put measures in place to make sure they were clean, and we quarantined them for a few days, and we kept that moving on. The realist, or the fleet guy, okay, or fleet person, there's water in the glass, it's just part of what we do, and we keep moving on. As far as controlling the controllables, we used kind of a planning, flexibility, and communication approach to show, how we were doing it, and putting plans and measures in place to deal with supply chain, COVID, and stuff. And our plans, basically, if I was going to overarch the whole thing, our plan is the things that we can control, let's get on it. Keep the main thing the main thing. Our make-ready process, for instance, for when we were gathering or getting new equipment delivered, sometimes it would take weeks to get something new in the field because, make-ready wasn't as important as repairing the piece of equipment that was broke down now. We reviewed that whole process, among other ones, to look for bottlenecks, look how to shorten up that process where we went from weeks to days, sometimes same day on stuff that didn't require training. So that was really our focus going on, was basically keeping the main thing the main thing. We had planning, flexibility, communication. Okay, first part of the planning is we anticipated the price increase and delays. Ordering equipment early. That sounds like, duh, that's a no-brainer, right? Up until this fiscal year, we weren't allowed to cut a PO that would take effect in the following fiscal year. Reason being, I was obligating TxDOT, or the state funds, that technically we did not have yet. So that was a huge thing. When we got that done, we went through and started ordering equipment early as we can. Anticipate manufacturer production relates. Basically, we stayed in close contact with them to understand what was logical to order at that point and what should be pushed off. And access factors and driving price increases. We did have a fair amount of, we have supply chain issues. This is the new surcharge we're giving you. And it took very, very little resource to prove that that equipment was already ready before the supply chain issue. They were just hiking the price because they could and peeling the layers back. And once they realized that we knew that equipment wasn't recently manufactured or built, they got on board, saved us $350,000 in just one PO when we caught on to what was going on. So we were doing everything that we could to anticipate the price delays and the price increases and the delays before they actually took place. As you can see, I'm going to leave this picture up. It's really getting off the slide a little bit. Pickup trucks being delivered and made ready. Prior to the recent events, these pickups would come to TxDOT shops. We have 30 of them across the state. And they would be white fleet pickups. We would stripe them out, toolbox, headache rack, brush guards maybe, lights, the whole 9 yards, decals on the side, installing GPS, getting the tags, getting everything squared away for the operator. Now we send those trucks to an upfitter. We never see them technically before they get off the trailer. They come to us made ready. We can hand the keys to the operators within a day instead of having them sit back and you do 1 or 2 a week for the next 3 months. So that allows us to move right along. Planning, like a politician once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay, well, this crisis, we put a lot of emphasis on preventive maintenance. Tell the folks, go, hey, we're likely not to get this thing replaced anytime soon. You better take care of it now. Get on your PM. Don't get behind. Very aggressive at doing that. And inspection. And I'm going to break inspections out into 2 categories. Our QACs, we call them, sometimes they used to be called PM coordinators, go through, I have 25 of them, one in each district, that his main chore is to go from truck to equipment to everything and inspect it to see whether or not PM's being kept up on it, any write-ups, anything dangerous going on out there. We step that up. We're hitting that harder. The other part of inspections is we used to, and we were having a sidebar conversation this morning about it, we used to inspect our vehicles when they showed up. We didn't even know when they were showing up. But they'd show up and we'd go out there with the PO and the specs and make sure it was exactly right, before we paid for them. What we've done is, this will be another no-brainer, instead of doing it that way, we went to the OEMs, to the vendors, and inspect them before they delivered them. Clued me in on that is I was doing my shop visits. One of them, I went into Dallas shop. I wasn't going to mention. Went into a shop to remain nameless, and they had a brand new dump truck that was just delivered. And I walked over and I was going to try to get the mechanics and the feedback. What do you think of it? And I went over there and I walked over to the side of the truck, and they had the air tank laying on the ground and they're rerouting hoses. And I'm going, what's wrong? They answer what the mechanic said. Well, all these hoses were rubbing. There was pinching and going on. It said it wouldn't take long and they'd failed. And I said, is this on all? This happens on all? Yeah, every Freightliner that came, after the bed put on was in this situation. So every single one, we'd go into the shop and they would reroute the lines. That's bad on me as a director to allow that to go on, that attitude to go on, that situation where it's easier to fix it yourself than to hold the vendor accountable, whether it's under warranty or whether or not we don't pay them until it's fixed. So we started inspecting the chassis before they went to the upfitter. Make sure they were 100% good to go. Not just one chassis, not a percentage, but all of them. Everybody in here knows that when you have a construction going on, the vendor doing construction on the highway going on, we have an inspector that follows them along. There's not a quarter mile that gets done without an inspector looking at it. They don't get paid until the inspector improves it. We're taking that same mentality and put it inside a fleet. In other words, we want to look at 100%. Okay, and when we see things like this that needs to be fixed or adjusted, sometimes it's a bad spec, sometimes it's an oversight, sometimes it just didn't show itself until it got put together. We get it fixed as early in the program as possible. The dealer can fix it a lot faster if it's in his yard. Okay, some of our, Texas is a big state. You could be in El Paso with a dump truck that needs to go back to the vendor, and that's a 20-hour round trip. So it's a thing. So we went ahead and did that with everything that we buy, all equipment, aerials, pickup trucks, everything gets upfitted. Our upfitter for dump trucks, though, is our prison system, Texas Correctional Institute. Prisoners build our dump beds, and that leads to some quality control issues. Since they're not likely to arrest better welders sometimes, we have to go through it. And so we started and inspected the bodies before they were painted, okay, and stuff like that. So it's a learning experience. But I will say this: it's a good program. When they're done, if you inspect it and you hold them accountable, they're exactly where they need to be. Because last year, for the first time in anybody's recent memory, we had more chassis that the prison could put through. So we went to another vendor. So I had dual tracks. Instead of getting 10 dump trucks a month, I got 20 a month into the system. And we took one of the prison dump trucks, drove it over to the vendor, and said we want it to look like this. And it worked out very well for us. Okay, let me get back on track here. Aggressive PM and really upping our inspection game. Other things in planning is collect and analyze data. I have a strategy and analytics branch of fleet. They report to me. They do only fleet data. Okay, I got about 5 MBAs in there. So when I walk in there, I do a lot of head nodding, like, I know what you're talking about, maybe. But anyway, we keep this data hub. We have dashboards, and we're rolling into predictive analysis and going on. So we had to really, really take a look at this to make sure that we were keeping the main thing, and making sure our replacement policy, we were keeping the things that needed to be replaced the worst on top of the list. If this is all Tableau based, by the time it gets into our data hub, it says most popular dashboards. I think there's another 12 dashboards on top of that. I was showing some of them to some folks in here earlier in the meetings. It's well done. I would say that we are ahead of our peers in TxDOT, the other divisions, on the use of Tableau. So when they're having information issues, no matter what, bridge, construction, they're coming to us for advice on how to set them up, which is really odd. And as you also see, we also keep a health report on there, just as a sidebar. 25 districts, sooner or later, the district will come up and go, I have the worst fleet in the state. And then you go into the health report that I send them, and you show them that they do not have the worst fleet in the state. The bottom line is we're trying to drive, and been successful, to drive fleet discussions to fact-based discussions. How many fleet managers in here, directors, ever had a conversation to start off like this? I feel like I don't have enough trucks. And you go, well, you feel like that? How many do you need? I don't know, but I feel like I don't have enough. And so what we do is we translate that, drive it into a fact-based discussion where we show them, and they have access to this all along, but we show them their utilization, their availability, their downtime, what they're using them for. And in some cases, we will put trucks back in. Other cases, they'll go back to their guys and say, you need to share a little bit more. It's been successful. And by the way, when you have 25 districts, there really is one of them that has the worst fleet in the state. And what you have to tell them is, my job is, statistically, you're going to have the best fleet and the worst fleet. My job is to make that gap as little as possible, technically by bringing the bottom up, not the top down. So we've been successful so far. Flexibility, basically look around for part sources that we did not traditionally use in the past. We like to use OEM parts as much as possible. Okay, they're usually spec'd out better, closer tolerances. They work better in the long run. I'm not saying all cases, but most cases. But when the parts started slowing up, we had to go and find alternate sources. And we did the easy thing first. We cannibalized parts from trucks that we had. We also looked in non-traditional places, and it turns out, just FYI, Harbor Freight has an engine that is a direct replacement for our Yammer engines that we had on our brine tankers. We went and bought them all up before the winter season, and how we were able to do that is that the district that figured that out, the shop that figured that out, shared that information with the other 24 shops. So within a day, we cleaned out Harbor Freight, and we had a very successful winter season. We'll go back to Yammer when we can get them. Also under flexibility is we looked at our funds. Obviously, we need more money. Okay, surplus sales was a very, very low priority for us at the time. Okay, when we rolled into this, it was like, we'll get to it when we get to it. We'd let them stack up in the back. With the prices of used equipment going up and the fact that money from surplus sales actually comes back into fleet, we cleaned out our yards, okay, and got them all auctioned off. TxDOT does not do the auction. Texas has a Texas Facilities Commission that auctions off surplus equipment. With the right encouragement, they upped their game, and that money came back to us, which we were able to put back into fleet that we hadn't planned on having because we were going to be short. Okay, we also use rentals and strategic reserve. Rentals, that's gap control. Lowering our risk through gap control is, if you need something, I can rent it usually in a day. I have 4 dedicated rental coordinators. They stayed up in the regions. We're very good in working in each other regions too, and they have a personal relationship with the rental community out there, with the vendors. So they know what's available, and they can keep it moving along pretty good. The other part of this is what we call our strategic reserve. Okay, for example, if I replace a dump truck, the dump truck that's being replaced is got a couple years of life out of it left. We will put it into what we call our strategic reserve. To maintain our fleet size, we take the worst one that's been in strategic reserve for a while and retire it. Okay, so it's a little cascade action going on. So what that allows us to do with maybe a couple hundred pieces of equipment, I can respond quickly to an individual's district's changing needs. I can expand that fleet in a day or two using rentals and strategic reserve. Okay, and that also keeps up for the shortage of equipment that comes in today's environment. So we're controlling the part that we can control. Refurbish, we're doing that too. We've always done that, but we're looking at upping our game at things like snoopers and stuff like that. You can get those refurbished. It's pricey, but not near as much as a new snooper. So we've been doing that as well. Explore your options. When we say take it elsewhere, and I'm looking at the fleet folks out here, you take it to a vendor, say a roller, they take it all apart, it's all on the floor, then they tell you, oh, it's going to cost this much more, or it's going to be this kind of delay. You know for certain there's another vendor down the road that can help you out, that can actually get that moving on. I'm not afraid to go over there with boxes and start picking up the equipment and change vendors. Okay, you gotta find, and we know who they are, after a while, but the ones with the highest standards, get it into them. Another example of that is V-boxes. We bought about $1 million worth of V-boxes, stainless steel, put them in operation, and it turned out there was a design problem. They needed another gusset in there, but it was fixed under warranty, or will be fixed under warranty. And the vendor did not balk at all. They just got on it. They're hiring welders inside of Texas trying to gather up enough stainless steel to get out there and fix it. It's a shame it had to go that route. It's knowing your community, establishing that relationship. Let me put this in there too, or I'll get in trouble. And follow all policy and make sure that you've got the best available vendors out there. Managing expectations. This is another thing that will help you out in the long run, or helped us out in the long run. Getting regular updates out to not only the senior leadership, but down through the ranks. Tell them pickup trucks are being delayed. We think they're going to come in at this time. We're getting everything pre-ready that we can. And if they don't come in, you send another notice out and say they didn't come in, but we expect them to come in at this time. State the facts, tell them, keep them advised. That stops a lot of the going to the executive director, the head guy in TxDOT, when he shows up at your maintenance section, he says, we need new equipment, it's not coming. It stops those type of conversations because the executive director knows and the guys in the field know that we are doing everything that we can do to get those delivered, and they have the latest information. Along with that, communication is be responsive, follow up with even the smallest question out there. The guy in the back row's question is as important as the senior leadership in the front row. Follow up, keep that going. And those conversations have helped us get through this because we're keeping, like the theme is, controlling the controllables and keeping the main thing the main thing. I've already talked about this, but I'll just go back and have an open dialogue with your vendors. Ask about price increases, whether they see any coming, why. Just negotiate face to face with that, And then, like I said, do your homework. Know when you suspect that they're raising prices just because they can, do your homework and know to go back and be able to have that conversation. I'm just going to finish up with this. It's in this time where we're doing a lot more with less. This is a great time to take care of your folks in fleet. Okay, they're doing the best job they can out there, and make sure that they know that you appreciate it. Make sure they know that we couldn't do it without them. Reward them. Use all the tools at your disposal. May not, for a state employee, it may not be pay, but express gratitude and keep them know that they're appreciated. That said, questions.
So did you guys bring in communication resources from your agency to help you manage outgoing communications, or is that something you guys had bandwidth internally within fleet to do?
I have my own information specialist assigned to me. I got called one day by one of the senior leadership folks within TxDOT and said, you need an information specialist. I think he was reading one of my emails when that happened. So, but yeah, and I managed to get the FTE. I will follow that up with all the data and driving fleet to a fact-based discussion. Over the years, we've built credibility with our senior leadership and the Texas legislature for that. Earlier, last year, when I asked for additional 25 FTE, they were granted, and I got them. I put more mechanics out. I asked for additional budget resources, ops and capital, and I didn't go, I need more money. That conversation usually goes like, fleet's bad, I need more money. And they'll say, well, how much you need? I'll go, no, how much you got? Okay, but what we did was showed them, if we don't get an infusion of ops funds, this is where the shops run out of money, this date. Okay, they believed it. Told them that I need more capital funds. If you don't invest, your fleet's going to look like this. The health index is going to drop. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like this. If you add 10 million, it's going to look like this. So have those conversations with credibility. It works. You're welcome.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.